Hello and welcome back. I'm Jason and welcome to another episode of the vlog. Today is a bit of a, I don't know, kind of lots of things to talk about kind of day. So the first thing I want to talk about is the EOS R5. Canon Rumors put up a thing the other day that's talking about the R5 isn't going to be in people's hands until October, end of October, early November. And they're saying this based on having received an email or having sent in an email that B&H told them that they won't get their camera till the end of October or November at the earliest. Now, clearly B&H and Canon know how many cameras are in each shipment because I have not received that email. The last email I have received from B&H is that my camera would be, or I should, that they were expecting a shipment from Canon to be in their stores or warehouse on or around September 16th, and that my camera would ship on or around that date. So I'm expecting, as I've not heard otherwise, Canon or B&H to ship my camera sometime next week, hopefully. You know, of course, Canon is probably, or is almost certainly telling B&H how many cameras that they have in each shipment, and B&H obviously knows how many people pre-ordered. So at this point, I could very much see, for example, B&H sending emails out to various people that are saying, you know, like in my end case, I ordered about an hour and 5 minutes after they started taking orders, and I have not received anything that says that my camera is not going to ship, hopefully, like I said, sometime on or around September 16th, so sometime next week as of the time I'm recording this. But obviously, you know, if you ordered later, there's more people in front of you. There's going to be a cutoff for when cameras ship or when your camera ships, and so you're going to have that kind of thing. So, you know, later orders in the day or maybe even orders at, say, 10 o'clock in the morning might not ship until the end of October or beginning of November. Again, obviously I don't get any insider information. I'm just relaying what I have seen and what I have been told, and given the fact that I haven't been told that I will have to wait until October, that my camera will be delayed until October, and I'm the person who's putting out the money on the matter, so to speak. I would expect that if Canon delayed the whole shipment to B&H was delayed, that B&H would be notifying all customers and not just some customers. So again, if you were pre-ordered an EOS R5, go with what you're being told by your retailer, not what is being told to you by people on the internet or rumor sites, because obviously retailers know way more about both how many people ordered the camera and how many cameras they're getting in each shipment from Canon. Because, Canon isn't going to necessarily hide that information. So that's sort of the EOS R update. Obviously, as soon as the R comes, I get my R, I will be doing some content on the R, or the R5, I should say. So, there's something to look forward to, hopefully in the next week or two. I had very mixed feelings, you could say, about the camera, and I continue to have sort of mixed feelings. I'm excited about the camera. Obviously, there's some concern about limitations, not so much video, but just in general. But it'll be. This is one of those things where everybody who goes into this camera, everybody who goes into a camera, just in general, like any camera, is going to be looking for different things. And so you have, obviously the either they aren't even video producers or they aren't even in the market at all, but they're just screaming their head off because they're offended that something, I don't know, or they're just trolling. But obviously there's a lot of people out there that like expected a $1,000 8K video camera with unlimited recording, blah blah blah, and there's other people out there who were, expecting a really good stills camera, and so the thing is like, I've watched a lot of reviews of the R5. I've read reviews from like the digital picture, and uh, you know, I don't envy anybody doing camera reviews anymore. Um, the reality is the cameras are like massively complicated, massively technical pieces of equipment. When I got my Rebel XTI or my 40D, the manual was like 100 and something pages or 100 pages. And that was kind of, people were making jokes then about how big the manuals are. The manual for the R5 is close to 1,000 pages long, if not more than 1,000 pages long. The camera has a tremendous amount of capabilities, or features, I should say. And the thing is when somebody's doing a review, there's going to be things that they notice or they pay attention to or that's important to them. And so they're going to cover it. And then there's going to be things that they don't notice, or they don't cover, or they don't, it slips through the cracks, or it's just not something the way they use their camera uh, that they deal with. For example, one of the things that has me slightly concerned is if you look in the index or the specifications table at the end of the R5 manual, uh, they talk about the viewfinder can run in one of two modes. It can run in economic mode, where it's a lower frame rate, so it doesn't, it updates slower and uses less power, or it can run in the high performance mode, where it updates at 120 frames per second, and so on and so forth. Uh, but what's concerning to me, and this is something I'm going to have to really look at when I get the camera, is in that table, they list like the number of shots in these modes, with the camera on its own, and with the battery grip, and then with the Wi-Fi transmitter. And with the battery grip attached, which is how I run all of my cameras, this is the standard default way that I use a camera because of the increased battery power, the increased shooting time, and the improved ergonomics for me of having a taller grip to hang on to and the vertical shutter release. Uh, they don't mention the high performance mode. They have that whole section blocked out. The only thing that they're showing is the eco mode, which could just be an artifact of testing, or it could be the camera with the battery grip attached doesn't do high performance mode. And if that's the case, that's kind of concerning as to why Canon made that decision. And this is the kind of little detail things, like it may not matter that much in actual practical shooting. It may be a real issue. I'm not sure. But this is the kind of things, like, I haven't seen it in any review that talks about this. And in the vast majority of reviews, nobody even puts battery grips on their camera. So it's like, okay, why would we even test this? But that's kind of an important thing. And you would think that having twice the battery capacity would allow for much better shot capacity, or shooting time with the battery grip, with the high performance display. And I'm not going to say that if it doesn't have a working high performance monitor, that's the end all be all of like failures or something like that. Because again, I haven't used a EOS R. I don't know how good the EVF is without the high performance mode activated, and so it may just be perfectly adequate for my needs to shoot with the EVF in the regular mode. But that's some of the things, one of the things that I'm going to be looking at, and I'll talk about more depth when I get my camera. So that's kind of the camera stuff. I want to talk about a couple of computer things. I was going to make a standalone video talking about some of this stuff, but I don't know if it's worth doing a standalone video right now. So the first thing I want to talk about is a problem I ran into with my MacBook Pro, and specifically not the MacBook Pro, but specifically macOS Catalina and the new notarization functionality that Apple is putting in their operating system. And, you know, I've talked in a lot of videos about camera stuff, about how engineering always is about compromises. There's always two sides of the coin. Yeah, you can make the camera shoot 8K video, but that's a lot of data to process. That's a lot of information to compress, and that consumes a lot of power and produces a lot of heat. And so, you know, you've got these trade-offs. You can not shoot as high resolution video, for example, or you can build the camera heavier or with some kind of active cooling or something to that effect to deal with the increased data that needs to be processed. You don't always get to have your cake and eat it too. Even with advances in semiconductor fabrication and so on and so forth, there's still limits to what a processor can do, or how power efficient something can be. I mean, you know, even if you look at desktop processors in computers, you know, we're still at around, you know, we're still building processors that are around 100 watts. Yeah, they do more work than a 100-watt processor from 2 or 5 or 10 years ago, but the power, you know, the trade-off is either more performance at the same power, or less power and less, you know, or less performance, but you get less power usage or heat, or however you want to look at it. You know, and the same thing applies to cameras. And, you know, obviously, like, you know, Canon isn't doing the most state-of-the-art manufacturing for their silicon and so forth. But anyway, there's always engineering trade-offs. And this is one of those things where there's an engineering trade-off. So the idea, as I understand it, in notarization of applications in macOS going forward, is that applications will have a signature, a hash, that uniquely identifies the application, not the application per, you know, like on your system, but like all copies of, say, Photoshop have the same signature because they're all copies of the same executable, the same binary, and therefore they have the same code and the same signature. And the idea is to increase the security in macOS. What Apple's going to do, or is doing, is having the OS call home to Apple every time you start an application or run a script in the command prompt, or any number of things that trigger the notarization security barrier. And that calls home, provides Apple with the checksum for the application that's being used, and then Apple can say that that's legitimate, or that that's a malware or something like that, and potentially block the executable from running. And ostensibly what Apple's selling this as is as a security thing. You know, and I'm not gonna, like, there are, well, what they're saying is that this makes it safer because they've checked, say, Photoshop, and they know that Adobe Photoshop isn't a virus, it isn't malware, it's not going to steal all your personal information, and so it's safe to run. And so every time you run Photoshop, it sends the signature to Apple. Apple says, yep, that's actually the correct Photoshop binary, that's not been tampered with or hacked or, you know, whatever, and go ahead and run it. Of course, right off the top of the bat, you can probably see the privacy implication of all of this. Now, again, I'm not an Apple developer. I should prefix all of this. I'm not an Apple developer. I have no real skin in this game. I don't particularly care what operating system I use. Here I have a Windows 10 desktop, a Mac laptop. I use iPads and an iPhone, and I have Linux servers that I manage and that do some of my workflow or handle some of my workflow. So I'm conversant or competent, I guess you could say, in all of these OSs. And there's things Mac OS does that I like. There's things Windows does that I like. There's things Linux does that I like. And there's things all those operating systems do that I don't like. And it's really, to me, a matter of picking the one that makes my life easiest, I guess, is the best way to put it. That is sort of the best tool for the job. So I haven't been able to dig really into the, or I'm not, I shouldn't even say haven't, I'm not even really interested in digging into the really nitty gritty details of exactly what Apple's doing in this new security paradigm of theirs. I've read a couple of articles. The articles seem reasonably well informed. They had links to documentation from Apple, which I read some of that. So I think I'm confident that what I'm saying is accurate, but obviously I could be wrong in some way. So anyway, the idea, like I said, that Apple's ostensibly saying the purpose of this is security. And of course, it doesn't take a whole lot of thought to realize there's kind of a privacy implication to this too. If your laptop or your desktop or your Mac is phoning home to Apple every time you start an application and is asking if this application is valid, that's putting a lot of information in the hands of Apple as to what your computer's doing. And even if they're not sending anything that's inherently identifiable in terms of like your Mac's serial number or something like that, where they can easily tie app to person or to computer to person who bought the computer to iTunes account, iCloud account or whatever, that kind of thing. There's still obviously some implications with that. IP addresses are limited. IPv6 addresses are basically unique to devices, and even though you have some complicated stuff with respect to IPv6 and privacy and device IP address rotation, it's still an IP address. It's certainly, there's been plenty of instances where companies who have said, oh, our data is anonymized, and somebody's gotten hold of the data and they could de-anonymize it because there's just inherent patterns in the way people do things. And so potentially, even if there's nothing being saved that's unique or logged to Apple's thing, as long as there's logging going on, especially if there's logging including, say, an IP address, there's a privacy implication. That said, I'm not totally, terribly world-ending. I'm a practical privacy person, I think, is what it comes down to. I want to minimize my exposure to, say, identity theft and the disclosure of my personal information as much as I can, but on the same token, I'm not tremendously overly concerned that Apple would maybe know that I launched Photoshop 7 times in a day, or the text editor that I use or something like that. I mean, as far as I've been able to tell, this doesn't sell, this whole notarization thing doesn't say anything to Apple about what you're doing or what files you're looking at or what the files contain or anything like that. It just says, I have this program that's being run. It claims to be Photoshop. The hash is 12345. Is that correct? And then Apple's server says yes. Okay, so with that out of the way, or with that said, the problem I have with notarization and this whole process is how well it works is supremely dependent on implementation. And this goes back to what I was saying about engineering and its trade-offs. So the idea here is that your computer doesn't store all the hashes where they could be modified maliciously or surreptitiously, and you could think that it could think that it was checking, or that the program that was claiming to be Photoshop was in fact Photoshop, because the hash that it has locally claims that it was Photoshop, but in fact it wasn't Photoshop. It was some other thing that was being maliciously messed with. So the idea is to get around that. The hashes are on the internet, on Apple's servers, in the cloud, if you will, and which can work. I mean, ignoring the privacy issues or potential privacy issues, the whole thing, that can work. But the problem is not all the time. You don't always have access to the cloud or the internet. And so to a certain extent, and like I said, a lot of this comes down to the details of how well it's and how it's implemented. So you don't always have access to the internet. Now, Apple clearly recognized that and put a check in place to ensure that if you don't have network connectivity, it doesn't bog down trying to connect to their servers and whatever it launches the app. Which, of course, to me, completely undermines the entire point here, because if you don't have network connectivity and it'll launch anything anyway, then what good does it do when you do have network connectivity? Because you can always launch something malicious spuriously when you're offline, or you don't have internet access. And so that's a pretty substantial end around to the idea of increasing the security of the system. But the bigger problem is computer networks exist in more than just the state of, I don't have internet access or network access at all, and I have complete access to the entire internet in the whole world, and so on and so forth. And a perfect example of that is what happened to me, which is why I'm even talking about this. So about a week ago, we had a fairly substantial thunderstorm blow through, and a lightning bolt actually struck the mast of a sailboat next door. Really close strike. Lots of EMP. Like, even though this wasn't a direct hit to our house or anything like that, lots of EMP. The speakers on my computer went pop from the EMP pulse. The Ethernet cable or the Ethernet connection that ties my laptop with its little Thunderbolt gigabit dongle back to my server port picked up enough of an induced current that it fried the switch port that the computer was connected to, and it fried the Apple Ethernet dongle. So I had to buy, that's the third one, or this is the third one I've owned. I've had 2 fried in lightning storms, which is not really that great when you think about it. And it blew out our internet access. So we had DSL from AT&T, not tremendously fast, but it worked, it was reliable, it was kind of always there. And the lightning bolt was close enough that it either fried our modem or induced a current in the line that went all the way back and fried the head-end equipment on the other end, or who knows. I'm not entirely sure. And so I was left with no internet access for 2 or 3 days, 3 days, something like that, because, thunderstorm destroyed my DSL modem. And I still have a network. I still have a file server with all of my images and all of my documents and everything on it, network printers so that I can print things, etc. My desktop, etc., that I need to be able to move things around. So, I can live without internet access. Or use my phone. It's painful, but it's something that I can sort of manage as long as my computer's still on the network and I can still get to my photos and get to my documents and get to whatever the things I need to work on are. And so I got a new Gigabit dongle, plugged it in, hooked it up, and then started trying to launch programs. And they just hang. Even text edit, a super basic, simple, built into the operating system text editor that's not complex at all. I'd go to launch it, and the computer would just sit there completely unresponsive for 30 to 45 seconds, and then text edit would pop open, or Lightroom would pop open and start loading. And when this happened, I was really concerned because, I just had hardware get destroyed. I had a DSL modem get destroyed. I had a port on my network switch get destroyed. I'm sitting there thinking, my MacBook Pro has been destroyed. Now, you could argue it's a 2014 model. It's old. It could use an upgrade, I guess you could say. But it does the job I need it to do. And the problem, like I've said before, with computers is much the same the problem that camera companies have right now, which is if you put a product out that's, when the technology gets to a point where it's good enough, you don't have people needing to upgrade every year because they're so far behind the curve. So my 2014 MacBook Pro is perfectly adequate for me to edit pictures on the road in Lightroom and, write some stuff, check stuff on the internet, log into my network and administrate things if I need to or whatever. It does the job. Replacing it with a $3,000 or $4,000 2019 or 2020 MacBook Pro will give me a slightly bigger screen and Thunderbolt 3 and some other ancillary things, but that's a lot of money for replacing something that otherwise wouldn't need to be replaced. So I'm having all these problems, and I'm getting really worried that I'm going to have to replace my MacBook Pro because, it's not working right. And I managed to sit on my phone for a while and do some Googling to try and figure out, what was going on. Because I rebooted it in diagnostic mode, and the self-diagnostic said everything was fine. When I could test things I thought maybe the solid-state drive had been damaged or something, it seemed like it was having a real hard time loading stuff from that, but I could reboot into safe mode and check the disk diagnostics, and they'd fly. They'd be perfectly fine. They'd find no errors, and they'd blow through the disk as fast as, anything, can blow through the solid-state drive in a Mac. They're fast. They work good. So I started Googling, Mac OS laggy and slowdown. And that's when I found out about this whole notarization thing and the phone home part of it. And it's clear that Apple wrote this in a way that they sort of anticipated some problems. If I pulled the Gigabit Ethernet adapter and I just had the wireless running, even though I didn't have an internet connection through the wireless, things were a lot less or a lot more responsive. It's like Apple engineers realized that, wireless could be flaky. Let's not wait 30 or 40 seconds for the wireless to work. We'll just try it. If it doesn't come back quickly, we'll move on and do whatever, launch the program. Likewise, if I turned wireless off, everything just ran flat out fine. There was no problem whatsoever. Lightroom would start like that. Photoshop would start like that. Everything just flew. Like there was nothing to slow anything down and no impediment whatsoever. It was a little worse with wireless on, but not bad. Like, maybe half a second lag or something. It was hard to really notice. But plug the gigabit Ethernet adapter in, and as soon as that was there, everything went back to click to launch a program, and 30 or 45 seconds later, it would actually launch. Things would beach ball. Like I'd go to click on something in the menu bar, like like Dropbox or something like that, and click on it, and the thing would just beach ball for 45 seconds, and nothing would work. And like I said, to me, this is a real problem. Again, ignoring the whole privacy issue, ignoring anything else. When you have a technology like this, as well-intentioned or well thought out or whatever as it is, when it starts interfering with the computer because the use of the computer, when it really hurts the end user's experience. So with my computer on a network but not connected to the internet, as it would be, say, like if your internet was down, or if you were on working on a set, for example, where you had to have a NAS or something like that, that your computer would be connected to store or process or catalog or deal with, video that's being recorded on set, and there is no internet access or something like that, where you're on a network. And I know this is an edge case. This isn't the norm of everything. But if you're on a network like that, your computer running macOS Catalina, at least I'm running the latest patch or the latest version, is almost near unusable. It's okay when apps are running, but I ran into all kinds of weird issues, even with apps running, where it would beach ball and it would just sit there, and then 45 seconds later it would time out and it would do what it was supposed to do. And this has been a big deal to me. I don't really believe that anybody out there has to care or should care what OS I use or what brand I buy or what I do. You do you. Buy the computer that does what you want it to do. If you are a diehard Mac user, get a Mac. Don't do what I say or do something because I said so. There's too much frustration can come up in cameras or computers or whatever because you're forcing yourself into a paradigm that just doesn't work for you mentally. So, I'm not saying don't buy a Mac, but I am saying I might not be buying another Mac. Like I said, I've got my issues with the whole computer phone home constantly before it runs an app thing and the privacy implications of that. But for me, the thing that it really comes down to more than anything is I run into situations all the time where I might have network access but no internet access, or something, or no network access at all. And right now, not having network access, it works fine. Your computer is responsive. But what happens in a year or two in the next OS, or when they have a mistake, they make a bug, there's a bug that impacts if it can't connect online. And then you're left with this, at best, horribly frustrating user experience. At worst, you're left with a bricked computer. Now, I'm not of the opinion that there's a conspiracy going on here. I read a lot of people talking about, and I've talked to even some friends of mine about this, about and they've said things like, well, Apple has seen how iOS and the iPad and the iPhone, blah, 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 and they're going to just make macOS like that, but with a keyboard. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That may be what they're trying to do in the long run is, contort macOS from being a general purpose operating system that allows the end user to, do what they've done on computers for the last 20 years, which is pretty much anything they put their mind to, into a super walled garden, super closed off, vaguely secure, but maybe not really, sandboxed, overbuilt, overpriced iPad. And, quite honestly, if that's the way they're going to go, I really don't want to have anything to do with Mac OS and Apple computers anymore. I'll still use their iPads and their phones. I don't mind a walled garden, closed off environment on a tablet or a phone, but on a computer, maybe it's just me. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and computers were not these closed off, restricted, you can't do anything, what the manufacturer tells you can do. Things you could do, like I said, anything you put your mind to on the computer. And from what I've seen application-wise, that's kind of where I want to stay. I don't want all my data in the cloud on somebody's server where it can be exfiltrated or stolen or deleted or damaged. I mean, look at what just happened with Canon and their image.canon, put your pictures on our servers in the cloud thing, and like there was a hardware failure unrelated to the Canon USA hack. There was a hardware failure and they lost a whole bunch of people's pictures, and their response was pretty much, sucks to be you. Your thumbnails are still here, but the original files are gone. Hope you have backups. You know, as a working photographer, somebody shoots video, somebody who just cares about the integrity of my data, having Adobe or Canon or Microsoft or Apple or, Amazon or anybody having the only keys and the only copies of my data, and no, I mean, what am I going to do? Like, if I'm a Canon, or if I was an image.canon user and Canon had this hardware failure and the images got deleted, what am I going to do? What's my recourse? They're not giving me money. They can't replace the images. The images are gone. As far as I've been able to see from what the press releases have said, the images are gone. Maybe that was like pictures of my wedding or something like that. There were really important sentimental things that I can't really replace. The images are gone. Canon's a huge company. I can't sue them. I don't have the resources as an individual, to sue Canon or Amazon or Adobe or whatever. And, not that I probably could anyway, because there's almost certainly something in the terms of service that's like, we don't guarantee that your data won't get deleted, and, you can't sue us if it does. Because that seems like a pretty good CYA kind of thing to throw in the terms of use. So I don't like this idea of being tied to, well, Apple tells me that I can run this program. I've had more problems with antivirus software over the years where it false positives on something, and a program that's completely safe is, worse, there's been issues with some antivirus programs that they decided that critical core Windows system files were actually viruses. I know, there's a joke in there. And deleted them and caused computers to your computer crashed and it wouldn't boot because the kernel was deleted, because the antivirus software got confused about a file signature and, removed this critical core piece of your operating system, unintentionally. And, I'm not a big fan of that whole thing, and I'm not a big fan of, well, if I have to pull out something that, old app or whatever. Of course, there's another thing. Apple has killed that. 32-bit apps are dead in the next version of Mac OS. And so, if you're relying, for example, on Photoshop CS6 or Lightroom 6 because you don't want to pay a subscription fee to Adobe every month, well, you can't upgrade to the latest version of Mac OS, and you're going to not have security updates. And there's down the road, you aren't. It's not even the latest to greatest. It's you won't have security updates, and your OS will be vulnerable to potentially being compromised somewhere or somehow. And that doesn't seem like a great idea to me either, given how much of our own personal information and critical financial information and whatnot is on our computers. So, like I said, I've had certain issues that are pushing me away from Apple. I mean, I have to say I like the OS. It's okay. I mean, there's certain things I like in the OS. I like the hardware. It's slim. It's got a good display. It's not got a really great keyboard anymore, but I know the keyboards are polarizing now. Some people really like them. I don't. I like the keyboard in my 2014 MacBook Pro. They got nice big touch pads. There are definitely things in Mac OS that's, these are positive features, or in Mac, in the hardware, that these are positive features. But then, on the same token, when you start down, there's a lot of things that, I'm not entirely sure about. I'm not entirely sure about Apple's transition to their own ARM CPUs. It could be really good. The CPUs in their phones and the iPads are certainly not crap, and I have no reason to believe that ARM or Apple can't produce a CPU that's competitively on par with, Intel or AMD. But you go down that road and you are literally tied to Mac OS. If you have software or whatever that is written for Apple's architecture and compiled for that, and you're there. And that's kind of a step away from, well, turning your computer into a big tablet with a keyboard. And I don't really want to go down that road. Like I said, I like the displays. I like that Apple has a real emphasis on quality in terms of things that are important to a photographer or videographer. They don't do this whole, well, we're going to put a 4K screen in it because 4K is a number that's big. The Retina screens are a reasonable resolution, and again, engineering trade-off. You have resolution. The higher the resolution, the more power it takes to drive the screen, the more power it takes to drive the GPU to put the pixels on the screen, and the more power it takes to render the whole image and everything like that. So not just going overboard on screen resolution, actually, like having enough that the screen is not pixely to look at, but not so much that you're just wasting pixel density, so to speak, is a positive thing to me. They have good color response. Now, some of that's starting to change in the PC side. Everything isn't just a rush to the bottom or a race to the bottom. I'm starting to see, for example, the 2020 Dell XPS 15 laptops, while they have 4K screens, they have IPS panels with full Adobe RGB color gamut, which is better than the display P3 gamut that Apple uses. So there's something to be said there. You can find decent options for creators on the PC side of things. But like I said, it's it's, I guess maybe it's, I've never been so wed to Apple technology-wise that I can't just walk away from them when they start doing something that is really problematic to me. Now, all this said, this could have just been a bug in the version of macOS I'm running, and they could fix it, and it could work fine, and whatever. You know, I'm not buying a new laptop right now, so I don't have to make a decision at the present time. I get to put that off until I actually need a new computer. But it is something I'm having to think about. It is food for thought. So there is that. The other thing, computer side, I wanted to talk about, and I kind of rambled on the Apple thing for a lot longer, is, as I said, my DSL modem got blown up, or whatever. It failed to work, struck by lightning, whatever. And AT&T's solution in my neighborhood when we called in is, well, they don't fix the DSL, they give you fiber internet. And in my neighborhood, fiber internet includes speeds up to gigabit, which is a huge deviation from what I was doing previously, which was 8 megabit down, 1 megabit up, roughly. I never quite got either of those, but so I now have gigabit internet because why not? And it's amazingly affordable. I think is probably the thing I'm more amazed at than anything is, you know, it's actually costing us less to have gigabit fiber right now than it cost us to have 6 megabit DSL. So I have internet that's 330 times faster, 333 times faster, and cheaper to boot. So that's a positive thing. But this is also changing how I look at and think about network, online, cloud, storage, backup stuff. Now, I mean, I know I just talked about not having all of my images on somebody's server, at least not as the only copy of them, but I have been for a long time trying to figure out a way to do off-site backups. I live in Florida. We have hurricanes. You know, buildings have fires and burn to the ground. Hopefully not this one and not while I'm living here. But, you know, there's lots of things that can cause catastrophic loss of data that, you know, even though I back up to external USB disks, that doesn't necessarily ensure that those USB disks don't get destroyed. I mean, it's not a far leap to think about something like, you know, evacuating for a hurricane, and in the process I drop the disks and USB disks, and they get destroyed, and somehow the hard drives in the computer fail too. It's not likely, but it is possible. And so I've been looking for a long time at cloud backup solutions. And I've said in the past that cloud backup is not really, to me, a real viable solution. And a lot of that comes down to the internet speeds that I have. When you only have 1 megabit upload and you have 3.5 terabytes of video and photos that you need to back up, you're going to be uploading for years and never get through the backlog. Having gigabit or even 500 megabit, or honestly even like 100 megabit upload, well, on gigabit I can get through 3.5 terabytes in about 8 hours if I let it just fully saturate the connection. And that makes it actually something that's viable. And I know I've, for a long time, and in a significant part due to my situation with internet access, have sort of been a champion of the idea of, you know, local backups. Back up to USB disks. Don't back up to the internet. Don't back up to a cloud service. I mean, if you can, do it, but like, don't rely on that being your only thing. Backup, you know, have at least a local backup. You know, and like I said, the more I look at you know, at least the more I shoot video, the more that kind of becomes relevant. That, you know, when you have, when like a vlog like this generates 12 or 13 gigs of raw video footage to process, and if you're shooting 4K, it's a whole lot more. And where do you go with that? What do you do with that? Storage is not as cheap or as easy as a lot of people want to make it out to be. But so now that I have fast internet access, I'm gonna probably do a video looking at backing up options to the cloud at some point. I kind of have to figure out what I want to do, and I'm not entirely sure how super photo, easy novice photographer friendly it's going to be. But I want to at least explore the options and sort of talk about things, because if I can back my stuff up to the other side of the country, essentially, to a reliable company, somebody that's not going to disappear next week or something like that, then I really, there's really an option to have that kind of catastrophic, localized failure or destruction type thing that you can recover from. And recover from it, it may not be inexpensive, it may not be fast, it may not be as easy, but just being able to recover from it, period, in my opinion, is kind of a big deal. It's kind of actually a really important use case for for stuff now. I mean, since everything that we do now is, as photographers, is digital, there's a certain fragility to digital stuff that maybe wasn't really there with film. Film could get wet. The development process to make film, to develop film, involved immersing it in liquid, immersing it in water. And the properties of the medium never went away. So there's a resiliency, a certain kind of resiliency there that, on the flip side, doesn't really, it's not really there the same way with digital. Now, on the other hand, we have way better things with digital to ensure integrity. So we can guarantee that every copy of our images is perfect to the day as the day it was taken in the camera. And every copy that we make to, say, put on our local backups, to put on a cloud backup, to do whatever, we can guarantee that every one of those copies is exactly identical, and therefore the loss of any of them can be replaced from any of the other ones, and you never have degradation. Generational losses are a thing. They're gone. They're not a problem anymore. There's no more, I've seen things like, if you're doing slides, a slide presentation for in a museum or something like that. So you have a master slide, and then you duplicate that into so many first-gen duplicates, and you duplicate those into so many second-gen duplicates, and then you duplicate the second-gen duplicates so many times so that you can replace the slide in the projector every week or whatever it is, so that as they get degraded by having a really bright light shone through it, you can continue to maintain the integrity of the image being displayed or projected without completely destroying the original, because every time you expose the original, every time it's out of darkness, there's some degradation that happens. It may not be a lot, it may not be fast, but there is some that happens. And that's not the case with digital. So we have really great tools in terms of being able to ensure, now with digital, in terms of being able to ensure that the image that came out of the camera that got written to the SD card or the CF Express card or whatever, got written to the flash card, is not changed, does not degrade, does not have a problem from there onto the hard drive in our computer, into our backups, into however we want to geographically diversify this to protect against localized loss. And, you know, like I look at this as kind of one of those things as wildfires or fires are running absolutely roughshod over California and Oregon and Washington State and parts of Colorado and a huge portion of the American West. And you have instances in the last year of, you know, a fire starting and blowing up and people having to evacuate within minutes. You know, like grab some clothes, grab the dog, grab your medication, jump in the car and get the hell out of Dodge because your house is, the fire is like 15 minutes away and it is going to destroy your house. And, you know, I have to say at least one thing about hurricanes, as much as they are increasingly scarier than crap to me because of the way they just explode into really devastating storms now, at least we have warning. You have a, you know, usually a good 5 days of heads up that there's a, you know, a significant hurricane coming. As you know, the National Hurricane Center and the weather models are at least good enough for that. And there's a modicum of ability to get your data or in your important effects or your important images or whatever, you know, backed up and somewhere located, relocated somewhere safe away from, you know, potentially storm surge or whatever. But like, you know, if you're one of these people in, you know, the West, in Texas, California, whatever, and you have these fires coming, like a cloud, you know, like think about what happens if the fire blows through while you're at work, like, you know, or you're on a job or you're out of the, you know, the building, and you can't just grab your backup disk and run out the door. You know, like it blows through your house and you're not there and there's nobody there to get the stuff and, you know, run. You come back and all of your photography, all of your data, all of your important, you know, images or whatever are gone. Potentially, you know, if the fire's hot enough, there's no recovering that. If the fire gets hot enough to get close to the Curie temperature of the platters in your hard drive, they all are wiped. I mean, modern data recovery for hard drives can do some absolutely amazing things. But there are physical limits to the materials and technology, and having a cloud option, an economical cloud option, a reliable automated cloud option that can put data in a building, you know, hundreds of miles away or out of harm's way for, you know, whatever it is you're doing, across the country or whatever, you know, can be, it's a really worthwhile thing if you can manage to do it with an internet connection that's fast enough. And like I said, this is something I want to explore in some more detail, do some like real digging into it, what kind of things you could expect or you could need to do. That said, I have rambled on for this almost an hour. I was not intending to do have this video be this long, but it has, I guess, and so it is what it is. But hopefully next week I will be talking about the EOS R5. I maybe be talking about doing some cloud backup stuff. Subscribe, hit that little bell, do whatever, you know, check it out, see what comes up, because a lot of this stuff I have to kind of play by ear based on, you know, what's going on, what I get, what I have access to, and you know, what's relevant at the time. But anyway, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Smash that like button if you like this. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff about computers, cameras, whatever. Now that I have fast internet, I can actually start doing some more like stuff. I really want to try live streaming some things, so I may end up doing a live stream like Q&A kind of session or something like that. You know, who knows? Sky's the limit in some respects. So again, thanks for watching. See you next time.